I think what we went through with the selection process of the chief of police for Fairfield demonstrated a lack of transparency, right? So I want to be really clear. For me, it was never about the candidates. It was more about the process. This task team was not only rejected, but it was also put in place in terms of what we're supposed to do. So that was one. The town attorney, in terms of how he addressed this committee and what he said, demonstrates to me lack of knowledge and empathy relative to understanding what a group of individuals, whether it's Black, Hispanic, Latino, it doesn't matter, would feel like. And there was a tremendous amount of secrecy that was put in place to vote in the new chief of police. So as a result of that, as a result of what we put forward, this task team, which I'm no longer a part of, that put forward to want to have some transparency, which was denied, tells me not the town of Fairfield, but the officials of the town of Fairfield are not prepared to essentially accept change. And I don't want to debate it anymore. My decision has been made. I'm disappointed because I really thought I had an opportunity to make a difference for the town of Fairfield relative to some of the issues that we're dealing with. And I think there's a lot of issues. I believe I also had mentioned at the town hall meeting or the last meeting, as a realtor, a week ago, I had a client that actually experienced what I would call racial discrimination, where the individual, the family was looking at a house in Fairfield, and an individual came up to the client of mine and said, basically, we don't accept your kind. So if we think racism is not alive and well, then I'm not sure where your head is in Fairfield. We might want to dress it up as something else, which is fine. But ultimately, I have decided that I cannot be a part of an organization that doesn't want to change. And let me be clear, I'm talking about the Fairfield officials. I'm not talking about the town of Fairfield people, because I think that's different. And I will also not allow my face and or brand be utilized as a checkbox.
All right. Thank you, Sonia. And as we said, a formal letter will go into a pleas to the town clerk. We can talk about that. Before I turn this over to Gina, I just wanted to remind everybody to stay on mute, and we're entering Steve, to stay on mute. We generally will call on the task force members first and then turn to our to the general public. So Gina, with that, welcome everybody. It's
Nancy,
nice to see so many of you.
Resolution to accept the resignation.
I'm sorry?
Need a resolution to accept the resignation?
No, because it goes in as a formal letter, and that's really all that needs to happen. So thank you for that point of order. But in fact, we just need to make sure that Sonia sends a letter to the town clerk. So Gina, with that.
Can you hear me? Okay, sorry. I can't hear you all of a sudden anymore. So the next item up is, I think we're skipping to item 5 on the agenda, Nancy, is that correct? We're skipping over number 1.
Brenda has to leave to a meeting, so we're making sure.
So to hear and consider a debrief post-mortem of January 21st regular meeting. So in an effort to really be as focused as we can, I think, as we have always done, I like to utilize the expertise of the people who are on our committee. So because Karen is actually a professional facilitator by trade, I actually passed this whole responsibility onto her to really collect some information and to lead this discussion. So for people who don't know Karen, she is on our task force, and she is a professional moderator and facilitator. So she's going to take over this part of the meeting. Karen?
Yeah, unmuting. I'm also going to share my screen. Let me just make sure that happens. Hopefully you all can see my screen and what's on there. Just somebody give me an audible yes. We can see, you know.
Yes, we can see.
Thank you
Yes.
so much. So a little bit of context for this. You know, when Gina talks about my experience facilitating, I have had the wonderful experience facilitating, you know, corporations and client teams in the Fortune 500. You know, the likes of PepsiCo and Kraft and Coca-Cola. Don't tell both of them, right, on this phone call that I've worked for both of them, although they both know on some level. Large organizations that often bring somebody in just to be kind of an unbiased facilitator of the process. And one of the reasons why I sent out a few questions to members of the task force is to make sure that every voice of the task force members gets heard in this debrief. Sometimes when talking about something that is loaded with some emotionality or some controversy, like our last meeting really was, and the events that transpired around it, one of the best ways to focus on progress and kind of strategic planning and strategic thinking moving forward is to just be very, very transparent about how everybody's feeling, put all the cards on the table, and then show everybody at once, here's where we're at collectively. So I sent 3 questions out to the members of the task force. The 10 that are, 10 remaining members on the task force, everybody participated, everybody answered, not every single question, because they might not have had something to share for it. And that's what's summarized on the next few slides. So it's, again, all the task members' opinions are represented here. And I'm really thankful to everybody who did it, because diversity of thought is what's going to empower us as we face challenges moving forward. So I'm just so grateful for that. Thank you all. It was a simple Google form with some open-ended questions, and the answers are anonymous. There isn't an answer that is linked to any particular person. They don't appear in the same order. I moved things around to fit on the pages so that there's really there's nothing to see other than the responses themselves. Don't even try to attach them to somebody, because that's not how these are presented. So the first question that I asked was, what positive thing has come out of the events of the last few weeks? For each question, there's 2 slides, just so you know. And Ryan, I'll email you this so that you'll have the deck to attach to the minutes. Okay, it's just a PDF. I don't want to do it right now. But focusing on the positives just puts us into kind of a more motivational mindset for the work that we have ahead of us and the hard work that we have ahead of us. And everybody really was happy to contribute to this question. I've bolded a few words here because they touched my kind of touched my hardworking and dedicated spirit myself. So dedication, passion, the engagement of the community, understanding of different views of the committee members, a renewed partnership with the at-large community who seem empowered and ready to participate. The number of community members who attended the call and stayed on for so long was uplifting and motivating. Clarification of the disagreements and interpretations of the mission gives us a much clearer picture of what we need to do and where the barriers and resistance will come from. So with knowledge is coming power there. Already on the scope and our role. We learned that in order to move forward, we have to listen to the perspective of others and try to incorporate those ideas as effectively as possible without losing focus. A really powerful statement about what we need to do. Showing the task force was beginning to come together, worthwhile work on identifying structural racism in the town policies and processes. Again, really great positives and motivational statements for the work that we're doing here. This response was a lengthy one, which is why it warranted its own page. These are not in any particular order. It's just one person shares particular. The task force had good intentions for this process, which is a positive. The process meaning the hiring of the police chief and engaging with the police commission. The participation in the community, again, so, heard that from more than one person. Nancy and Gina did a great job of asking the attorney some tough questions and pushing to understand. So great leadership with our co-chairs. Putting racial equity on people's radar, regardless of the press or the outcome, and getting it on people's radars, kind of focusing on the awareness, that's a positive. Setting the tone for what can be expected from the task force when and if it's put in place is positive. I'm not sure whether that meant a future committee at some point, if that's put in place, but we're basically starting to understand the dynamics there. And also our understanding of the interviewing and hiring process. That's something that we needed to do in the work that we're doing. So positives to focus on coming out of what happened, and ways to move forward with the right mindset of problem solving and, heading into our challenges with the right motivation. We also talked about what lessons we learned. So, again, the way we can get into life lessons, great big learnings, having a growth mindset is what can we learn through a process like we've just been through. And again, by the process, I mean from our initial request to the police commission, all the way through to the meeting last week and subsequent meetings to tonight. So it's this whole length of time. But we're learning just how divisive the issue of racial equity and justice is. Some people may have known how divisive it can be all along. Some people are in different places on the learning curve. We've revealed challenge addressing racial justice in Fairfield, with differing views about how to best address equity and justice in Fairfield. Sometimes those views are at cross purposes. Those who doubt it exists, the need to address it and the need to address it directly, and those who like the idea of study without action, and those who wish to act. We learned that not everyone values the work in the same way, and center the feelings of being asked to change the status quo over the damage the status quo inflicts. So we've got some polarities to manage. I've learned that we are an easy way for some town officials to score cheap political points with some constituents. I was surprised by that, given that we as a group are intentionally diverse and nonpartisan, and that Kupchak touted our group's creation as evidence of her responsiveness. I also learned that I feel stronger and more empowered to speak as a part of this group than if I were a resident on my own. Again, it ties into that empowerment theme that we had on the first few slides. The first select woman is not fully committed to our work and will be an ongoing source of obstructionism. I do believe that the Board of Selectmen as a whole may be able to protect our work, but we will be under intense scrutiny. And because I know Brenda is on the call, I know some of this stuff some way. We'll talk about these things afterwards. Just want to get through the presentation first. So I'm aware of that, and I just want to call it out that I know you're hearing and seeing, but this is transparent about what's going on in our committee or in our task force. Other lessons that we learned, a task force member says we've learned we need to stay within the charge guidelines. We've learned, and this is a three-part lesson, the task force as defined today is only in place to collect data, conduct interviews, and to make recommendations for next steps, not get involved in day-to-day town affairs. We've learned that putting the first select woman or Tony Baldwin into our conversations earlier could have changed the messaging around our intentions. I think we now know for the task force to be effective, it has to be formally established with a well-defined charge. Some of these will factor into decision-making we're going to have later in the meeting, but on the record here, the charge and missions I'm learning about. It's important to have some basic training on town processes and chain of command before getting into a town project. So we may need to step back and add some training as a next step. Our efforts might be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, but we must press on because the work is hard and will continue to be hard. And we need to be creative and work to try to move the parameters in inches instead of miles. So again, lots of lessons to learn, things that we can, kind of keep in mind as we move forward. The third question.
So I'm very sorry. Brenda only has a few more minutes because she has to go to a Board of Ed meeting.
Okay.
I think. I don't know what there is another meeting. So if we could, and I know this is essential to get through and for her to hear it, I just want to make sure she has an opportunity to respond to some of this before she has to go, because it is a hard out.
Okay, well, when is the hard out? I mean, we have 2 more slides.
So
Okay.
I have to sign off at 6:30 because I have a budget meeting. And when I first talked to Nancy about coming on, it was for the sole purpose of trying to just share how I felt this process, why I established the committee task force.
Oh, sure.
And
Do you want to
some
hear
of the
what? the task-
guidelines.
Do you want to finish
And-
hearing what the task force has on their minds? Or
No,
do you just wanna
absolutely.
share what's on yours?
I actually listened to the entire meeting after the fact of the last meeting and the one on the 5th. And I just wanted to kind of respond to some of the stuff I heard on that meeting, which I listened to it was like very long meeting.
All
and-
right. I'd
and-
love to be able to finish these 2 slides instead of aborting them real quick. It's just 2 more slides and then.
I know, I don't want to not give, I thought Nancy and I had agreed that I would come on at 6, speak with the task force, allow them to speak to me, and then I would sign off at 6:30. That's what I wanted the task force to have the opportunity to do, is to speak to me directly, and that I could speak to them directly as the first select woman of the town of Fairfield and the person who established the task force. And I didn't want to have to rush off, which now will be in 10 minutes, because I don't think that's appropriate either. So you
No,
made,
just following the agenda the way the chairs had just guided me to do. Nancy and Jean, if you want me to just stop, I'm happy to stop sharing my screen.
I'd like to get 10 minutes of Brenda giving her introduction and what she wants to do. We only have 10 minutes. Let her speak, please.
I think it's fine. I think this is a good place to stop.
Yep.
We can continue after
Okay.
she's
All right.
finished.
I'll stop sharing for a moment so you can go into speaker view if that's helpful.
so can everyone hear me?
Yes.
So I first wanted to just start off by saying that I sincerely apologize for anyone who thinks that I established this task force, as some members said in the press or during the meeting you had prior to this, that I did this to some political thing, or that I was trying to do window dressing, or whatever the comments were. And I can assure you that was not the case. I came up with the idea of establishing the task force because I genuinely wanted this discussion to happen, this work to happen, and for the results to be researched fully by the task force. I called each one of you and other members who weren't appointed and had conversations, and during those conversations offered myself up as a resource as the leader of the town to any one of you who had any questions during your work, to reach out to me anytime you had any questions at all. And I envisioned this task force to operate similar to other task force. I served in the legislature for 9 years. I served as a co-chair of task forces in the legislature. I recently received a report from the Strategic Planning Committee that was established in 2017 that literally had done this work for years and just submitted a draft final recommendation, which they interviewed elected officials across the town, business owners, education officials, department heads. I mean, they really did a tremendous amount of work, and then came up with a whole list of recommendations, things about changing our form of town government, to changing our town seal, which is something I actually agree with. But there's a whole host of recommendations in there. And in the process, and I know it's not always fun to have to follow processes, I have to follow them every single day as the leader of this town. I reach out to the town attorney when I make decisions or I want to do things. I'll call him up and say, hey, I'd like to try this. Is this within the parameters of the town charter? Am I violating any state statutes by doing this? There are certain rules that I have to abide by as the chief elected official in town, as do the Board of Finance members and the RTM members. We all have sort of our, what we can and cannot do. And so I really apologize if anyone thinks that I was trying to be an obstructionist in any way, shape, or form, because I can assure you I was not. When I first got that information that the task force was wanting to be part of a personnel hiring issue for our chief, I was taken aback by it. I mean, I didn't think that that was in the mission. I didn't think that was part of the mission. And I'm not saying that that it wouldn't be appropriate for the task force to interview the police commission, for example, who are, some towns have police commissions, some do not, and ask them, what's your process? What do you do? How do you do this? How do promotions work in the town of Fairfield, within law enforcement, within the fire department, within town government? I mean, those are valid and good questions for the task force, in my opinion, to find out and see if you think there is some bias there, or if there's issues, and then make those recommendations, because the charge says do research, make recommendations to the Board of Selectmen for review and approval. And it wouldn't be just the Board of Selectmen, for example. In my opinion, any good task force has public hearings. There's information gathered, and then it's shared back with the public, and then input is received from the public, not just 3 members of the Board of Selectmen saying, oh yeah, I like those. That's, it's got to be, the whole community really has to be robustly engaged. And when I chaired a task force for a year on in the legislature, it was a lot of that, and there was a lot of input from the public and from a whole host of things, and it was all very transparent. So again, I know I can understand some people thinking, well, this was a great opportunity because we were hiring a new police chief, and most of the issues that sprouted up from happening across our country had to deal with police issues, right? But at the same time, we do have a process in town. And again, I can't just go and do what I want. Like, I think our town seal's lousy. I think it's racist. And I thought, I don't like the town seal. I want to change it. And someone said, no, you can't. It's in the town charter. You actually have to impanel a charter revision commission with people, and there's all rules about who can be on the commission and all these things. And then that's how that process is changed. So, I get not liking the way certain things are, but I just wanted all of you to know that I genuinely want you to do an amazing job. I have faith in your ability to do it, but we all have to operate within the guidelines of mission statements and state statutes and town charter, and not just you guys, me too. So I just wanted to have an opportunity to say that. And I just wanted to say that my door's open. When I was sworn in last year, I came into a lot of problems in town hall. And I said, when I was inaugurated, that my door is always open, not just to town employees, but to the public. And I try to make myself extraordinarily accessible to our town. I spend a lot of nights and weekends calling people back, listening to people. And I would hope that any one of you would feel the same way with me. I'm your first select woman too. And maybe you don't always agree with, things that I do or say, but I will listen to you, and I will be happy to answer any questions you have about anything. And the town attorney is also a resource. He's not just my attorney. He's the Board of Selectmen's attorney. He's the RTM's attorney. He's the Board of Finance, and any government body that we have, or any task force or commission, goes to him and asks questions about all kinds of things. So that's all I really wanted to say. And I'm sorry, I thought I would have had a little bit more time in the beginning to be able to engage with all of you, but I wasn't aware that you were going to do some other things first. So unfortunately, I'm
Brenda, may
3
I
minutes.
ask a question? Can I just ask a question, Brenda?
Sure.
So I appreciate your words and your comments. And I think it's actually very helpful, right?
I'm sorry, I can't see who's talking.
That's me. Hold on. Hold on. It's Sonia.
Oh.
So I appreciate what you're saying, and I think it's helpful, and it gives another perspective. I think perhaps from someone that lives in Fairfield that was part of this, I agree. You called me and you checked in with me to say, hey, where's your thought process on that? And that meant the world to me. So I want to be clear about that. It meant the world to me to have you call me to ask that. And that's why I signed up, right? After that discussion, I was like, I'm all in, because I felt at that particular time that you were extremely supportive of this work. The disconnect that I'm starting to see or have seen is when we bring in a town attorney to represent you. That's when we start to lose the genuineness that I think, Brenda, you brought to the table.
So what I want to say though, Sonia, is like I said before, he doesn't represent me. He represents the town. So he, he negotiates lease contracts. He advises the RTM when they have questions. And like I said, any board and commission in town, the Harbor Commission,
No, I appreciate that. I
the
totally
Ethics
appreciate
Commission.
that. But
So-
I just want you to understand, as someone that lives here in Fairfield, I signed up for this because of you. So you have had an impact on, I think, a lot of people on this task team, on people that are listening. It is because of you and your commitment around this task force I signed up. I've been asked to be on a lot of these task force where I've seen a disconnect between what the person wants to do and et cetera. So I'm just imparting that you were a serious, inspirational woman, leader, irrespective of what our political affiliations are, to me to sign up for this. And so I want you to walk away with understanding that I didn't walk away from this task team lightly. It meant the world to me. I thought I could make a difference along with the rest of the task team. I think what devastated me was the response from the town attorney.
And if we could hear from some other, because Brenda has to leave, if we,
So
if
I
there are
do,
other task force
just
members
want
that
to
wanna
say
speak.
really quickly that, it's unfortunate because I think that a lot of this controversy or misunderstanding could have been avoided if the co-chairs had just reached out to the town attorney prior, or even to me, and just asked, hey,
Brenda,
what's within our mission, and
but
what can we, and
this is
what
the
can't we
crux.
do?
Gina,
I
do you
just want to say something, Nancy.
yeah.
I think that, so what I'm hearing is that you would like us to ask questions. That's kind of our job is in this task force, is that we should be questioning. And I think that one of the reasons why it felt very different to a lot of people, and you saw the comments that the task force gave you, is that it was phrased as a question. We asked a question. And I think historically in these spaces, when we're trying to talk about the really difficult work of racial justice and equity, questions are framed in a way that make people feel uncomfortable and defensive. And it doesn't matter how nicely the question is asked. It was a difficult question. And the response was based in the fact that it felt uncomfortable to be asked the question. The question was not, it was not a demand. Sandra was actually fantastic about helping us reframe it so that it wasn't a demand. We really wanted to ask you in a respectful way. And this is a very old story when we're trying to do this kind of work, which is this work makes people feel as though they have to protect themselves, and they respond in a way that might not be what they intend. And so ultimately, what we heard from Jim last week is a lot of the request was even disregarded because of the feeling that the question itself inspired. And I think moving forward, it's going to be really important that that context is remembered, that sometimes a question is just a question and it can be a no, and we can accept a no. But if we can't feel as though we can even ask a question and we have to dance around the question because we're worried about how somebody's going to take the question, we were willing to accept. And I still feel fine with if it was just, no, it's not an appropriate place. But I think that it wasn't just a miscommunication. It was really a respectfully asked question that wasn't responded in a way that made us really feel like we understood the transparency. And I hope that going forward, that when questions get asked, we're really looking at this through this lens of, you know, this is hard work and the questions are going to be difficult, but we all have the same goal, which is we want to move Fairfield forward. We want to make this a place that feels equitable and move our community into the 21st century. And so I hope that that's what I hope we learn from this.
No, Gina, I really appreciate that. And, you know, I actually tell you, I have to tell you, I feel really bad that you feel that way, because again, I'm looking at it in process. You know, I look at it like the task force was doing all this good work, right? And then thought about, hey, there's a police chief being hired. And then right there and then I would expected an email from you and you and Nancy to me and the town attorney, or one or the other or both, saying, hey, we were thinking this, we've been talking about this in our task force. Do you guys think this is within our mission, or is this, you know, is it not? But instead, I just got an email late on a Friday afternoon from Nancy as an FYI with the email that was already sent to the police commission. And I think that wasn't a question. It was, we did this already and here it is. And
What we did was ask a question.
But not to me. I wasn't asked a question. I was sent an email that was forwarded, that was already sent to the police commission. And on the top of the email was FYI. So I wasn't asked.
We should write every question. So just, I want to make sure there. So your expectation is that we should always ask you every, you know, whatever we're going to do, we should make sure that we run through it.
Absolutely not. But you have to admit that's a big deal to send that email to a police commission saying, hey, we want to be part of an HR personnel interview process, without ever saying, don't forget me, ask the town attorney, hey, is this within our mission? You know, do we have the right or authority to do this per state statute, town charter, our mission? Just ask, that's all. I mean, I ask all the time questions like that to the town attorney because I have to. I'm a leader and I have to follow all the rules, right? So I'm not saying that you shouldn't ask questions. I'm just saying ask about the process is all. That's all I'm saying.
I feel like it is a chain of command thing. Like, you know, asking your boss's boss for something as opposed to, and maybe, you know,
I'm not your boss.
No, no.
I think
I'm not your boss.
I
just there's a mission, and Gina and Nancy helped write it with the town attorney, and I'm not an attorney. And listen, I've followed a lot of I've been on, you know, I've been in elected office in various roles, and I've always, you know, followed the Roberts rules or the town charter. And all I'm saying is there's a mission statement with clear set guidelines. And so, for example, if next week's the task force said, we'd like to, you know, we want to interview your next building official, I would say no, right? Because that's not the mission of the task force. The task force is supposed to take all information from every place, find out how we hire our building official, find out how we hire our police chiefs and captains and sergeants and fire department and whatever. Talk to the school district about what curriculum they teach regarding diversity and things of that nature. Get all this amazing information and then work together to decipher how you think, you know, it should change. What's the problem? Is it racist? Is it biased? Is it unfair? Those types of things, right? And then put that together and come before the Board of Selectmen, or have public hearings, which I think would be prior to your recommendations being submitted. And then the Board of Selectmen has it. That's what it says in your charge, right? So that's all I'm saying. And I think it was misunderstood, like Brenda's shutting it down. You know, she's saying, no, you can't go there. And it's just because that's the mission. And I think it's more sensitive to everyone because it's about race. And we're all sensitive to that, you know, very sensitive. And so I think that's kind of where it got like that.
This is Steve. I'm going to just comment. So we asked a question, there was a process going on. We wanted to observe the process because it probably won't go on for another 20 years. So rather than have to ask somebody what happened, and we figured somebody could be just a fly on the wall and listen. It's an opportunity, it's an opportunity to see a process. To Gina's point, you could have said, no, you can't ask any questions, but you could sit there. I know it's a personnel issue, but I haven't seen the statute. I haven't seen the state statute that says that we can't. I mean, Westport does it. Westport
Well,
does it.
Westport, they don't have a police commission, right? So this is something the task force. Now, listen, I get it. The police chief came up and you guys are doing all your work and you were like, oh, this is a wonderful opportunity. And I'm not saying I don't understand how you all felt, but at the same time, it's an HR issue, right? We have a police commission and there is a state statute that regulates the towns that have police commissions. Some towns have it different. Some towns have a different process. And I think the task force should be questioning, looking at the state statute, Steve, finding out, how other towns do it. What do they do? How do they hire not just their police, their fire, whatever, but obviously police is a big one for this task force. Find that out. Is it biased? Is it racist? Should there be a diversity person? I heard some, I was asking around since this all happened. I think of
Yeah.
our police commission said in our captain's test, we actually have a minority chief come in and review the answers, so I don't know all of it yet because I'm learning just like you guys. But I think that's where you could have gained good information about.
We did review the state. We actually did review the state statute, which does say that the commission could invite someone into the meeting. And so, again, that's why we asked the question. It is within the state statute that we could be invited. It was just a decision, and whatever the decision was, we will work within that. But I think in terms of perspective, recognizing that to our community, this decision was really important. For me, the current chief put something in place that made me allow my son to go jogging because I didn't have to worry about someone calling the police if he was on their lawn because of how he looks. And to me, as a mother and a citizen and a taxpayer in this town, I wanted to know if we were going to have a new chief who thought in the same way and who was willing to do the same thing. And so I wanted to make sure that I could say that, and I actually wasn't even planning on being in the meeting, but that someone could say, hey, this is something that the chief did. How do you feel about that? Just to get that out, to give the person who was applying the opportunity to speak to it, because I know Bob Calamaris and I know he could have spoken to it in a tremendous way. And I think it would have gone far to help people when you introduced him, to say, we invited the task force in and he was able to let us know that he's done X, Y, and Z. And this is how he feels about racial justice and equity. And we really felt at the time that it was a positive thing that we're offering. Now, I'm understanding what you're saying, that you want us to run things by you. I think that, as a group, we'll have to talk about, how that all plays out. But I think we all understand really clearly what the expectations are from this point on.
Right. And Jean, I don't mean for it to make it sound like I want you guys to run everything by me. That you have work to do. You have a mission. You guys looked at it. You signed on to it. You said you wanted to follow the mission. You wanted to it's a mission, and it's your charge, right? And so that guides you, not me. But if you have questions, right? If you're going along and you say, oh, wait a minute, I want to do this. I don't know if this is outside the parameters of that. Call the town attorney, ask him. He helped write it with you and Nancy. So I don't want you to feel like you can't do work. And I get what you're saying, but there were 3 candidates applying for the chief, right? And frankly, when Chief Liddy said, former police chief Liddy said that he was going to direct our police to no longer respond to calls when people said there was a minority in my neighborhood, I actually was flabbergasted by that, because I was like, we're doing that?
Yes.
I mean,
and so I
like-
wasn't flabbergasted by that
Right.
at all. I
So,
wasn't shocked
I mean,
at all.
to be honest with you, I would never expect any chief or any captain or anyone in our town. And I was shocked to hear that was even like that Chief Liddy was allowing cops to go on calls like that, right? So that's a learning experience. But at the same time, this is an HR thing. And I think that's where it just got outside, I think, the parameter of the charge of the committee.
I think Alex has a
And-
question.
And so I've got like, I'm really, I got 2 minutes. And
Alex, would you like
listen,
to?
I just want to reemphasize that I'm here, guys. Call me up. Call me on the phone. We could set up a time if you feel comfortable sitting alone with me in a room with a mask on. I'm here, and I know you guys had a kind of a bumpy thing with the town attorney. I think the way it just blew up. I think people got, there was like a little name call, everybody felt there was a lot of humanity going on. People feel like they're being attacked, and they attack. And I mean, we know how that goes, right? I think we just need to I envision this place as a safe place, right? A place where people can come and share, what they're thinking and not feel like they're, I mean, we're supposed to expose biases within each other, right? So if I say I have this biased, or I say something and you say, Bren, that sounds biased, instead of saying you're a racist. Do you know what I mean? So there should be that dialogue that we all should have, not just in these rooms, but in our community. So that's how we learn from each other. And if people feel defensive, then they're going to wall up, and then no one's going to learn anything.
No, I thank you, Gina, and thank you for Selectwoman. I'm Alexandra Ocampo. I remember when you came to my door on Bonnie Terrace a long time ago, and I respect you. I don't agree with a lot of your politics, but I think you're a great role model, especially for a lot of the ladies here who are running for political office. But outside of the process, which again, I was disappointed. That's too bad we got denied. What hurt me, and if you watch the the recording, it hurt me, Brenda, that you said in a prepared statement that our task force who spoke to you and we're so excited, that we were trying to taint the legitimacy of the hiring, and that we were suggesting that someone was doing something outside the law. Do you regret saying that? Because I feel like that's so
and again, here's how these misperceptions come. I'm in my office, I'm on the phone, I've got 100 things going on, and my chief of staff walks in and shows me on her phone an email from Anna from the Patch with a statement from a task force member that was derogatory toward me and calling me out for not being honest or transparent, all these things. Now I'm like, what? So now I hear all this blowing up, and frankly, yeah, I that put me on the defensive, right? A little bit, because no task force member called me and said, hey, Bren, what's going on? It was right to the press. So it felt like almost like, let's blow this up a little instead of have a conversation. And then secondly, yeah, I don't want, listen, when there's this press, right? I said this to Nancy the other day. When there's this thing, the racial task force feels left out of the hiring process of the chief of police. The racial task force says it's not transparent and they're not allowed in. You have to admit that could somehow give the perception to people that there's something going on nefarious in the interview process. There's some backroom deals, or, like in Bridgeport where somebody got the questions before, you know what I mean? And I don't want people to think that Fairfield, listen, we can all improve, but I don't want Fairfield to think that we run corrupt processes here, that there's corruption in our hiring process. And to me, those 3 individuals who were applying for that job, that's the biggest job interview of their lives. They may have been, they've been the three of them been in law enforcement for 20, whatever, 5 or whatever years. And here they were going for the biggest job interview of their entire lives. And all the press is about how it's not transparent and this and that. And how would you feel if you were going for the biggest job interview of your life and people were kind of calling into question the whole process, like it wasn't really any good, and anybody who got picked was probably just, you know, was corrupt or something. And that made me feel bad for those three guys as the first select woman. So that's how I felt. And that's it, I guess.
I just want to say, as a task force member, I felt the same way as you did, Brenda. I read that headline and I thought, what is going on? And I felt like we perpetuated a misleading narrative. And when we sent our letter, and I mean, we can talk about this later, but we expected a no. We didn't ask about the process. We asked to ask questions. That was in our letter. We said we want to ask questions of the candidate. And I felt like the article that came out after was we allowed a misleading narrative to play out. That's how I felt, looking at it from my vantage point.
Doug?
Hi, Doug Bunnell speaking. Brenda, I really do appreciate you coming on and extending your time here to address this, and appreciate that. I'm concerned, though, that in our making the objective assessment that the process was not transparent, there's no implication automatically there that we thought it was corrupt or there was something sneaky going on. But the fact that that was the immediate interpretation and sort of the story that went out, and there was an accusation that we were sort of being sneaky, I think there's I'm personally offended by it. So, but who cares? The issue really is that's a systemic issue. That's what we're dealing with. Like somehow we call out a lack of transparency, and then all the people run to their side camps going, oh, that's sort of them sticking their nose where it doesn't belong, and it's sort of they should stay in their place. And all of a sudden we're getting this sort of systemic reaction of like, these issues should be marginalized, you should be quiet about it, you should follow the rules. And that's code for stay in your place. So it does, as you alluded to earlier, it lights up sort of the concerns people have about this still being sort of a quietly, not a substantial commitment, just sort of a fig leaf. And I think I appreciate your being here today pushes against that, so I appreciate it. But that's the history of this issue. You know, people don't want to talk about how deeply embedded this stuff is in town policy, town administration, and the culture in general.
No, I agree, Doug. And I think each town is different and has a different sort of situation. I like to say, you know, as someone who grew up here, I think we have a pretty good town. I have faith in our town. Yes, we've had corruption in our town government, you know, last few years, but I don't think that's our town as a whole. And again, I didn't want anyone or want the task force to feel like I or anyone else to stay in your lane. But people tell me to stay in my lane all the time. So just so you know, Board of Finance tells me to stay in my lane. You know, they're like, we're the Board of Finance. And so like, it is what it is. I mean, we each have sort of our own roles and responsibilities. And, to Sandra's point, asking the question, right? So I think the email to the commission was a little more than asking a question. It was, and again, no harm, no foul, right? Task force says, we want to ask this question. Maybe we want to submit questions to the police commission to ask on our behalf. They could tell us to go, pound sand, but again, ask the town attorney, do you think this is the wrong thing? Or can we do this? Do we have the authority? Or are we supposed to just take information and then put it together and then make recommendations to change the way we hire a police chief or maybe we don't have a police commission, maybe we have something else, or maybe there needs to be, like I was saying earlier, there's some captain's test that has a minority law enforcement personnel in there to make sure that it's not biased, right? So there's all these things to learn. I don't know them all, but I think that that's what part of what you guys, not just one thing, you have a lot to do, because there's there's bias all over the place. So I think that's where it got. And again, Doug, I think, some task force member going to the press before picking up a phone and calling me, or one of the co-chairs, could have avoided all of this stuff that went on in the press, where it should have been going on like it is right now.
Just real quick, the other thing with the answer to build on Doug's, it was that we've been doing it since 1930s. That's.
Well, again, see, that's the press, Steve, right? So.
No, it was in the.
No, because they said, oh, this is the way we've been doing it since 1930. Now that could be good or bad, right? But what I'm saying, it doesn't matter if we're doing it.
Good.
But I'm just saying, it doesn't matter if we started doing it last year that way. I'm talking about, what is the mission of the task force, and what is your role? What did you sign up to do, right? Maybe that's part of your recommendation. We've been doing it since 1930. We need to do it differently. We looked at all these other towns.
Let's
how they do it.
Process. Let's observe this thing that's been going on since 1930 instead of reading about it in the paper. It's an opportunity. That's all.
Right. I get that. And listen, I don't know. Listen, I'm not an HR professional, and so I hate to do this to you all, but I am getting yelled at right now because there's a meeting going on that I'm supposed to be in. I'm here, guys. I value the work you do. I think you're going to do a great job. I don't want to have an adversarial relationship with you. And as to Alexander's point, listen, we're all from different backgrounds, different party affiliations. It really doesn't matter to me. I am your first select woman, all of you, no matter if you like me or not. And if you want to call me on the phone, I want to listen to you. So if you have questions, call me on the phone, shoot me an email. And again, if you have any process questions, I know some of you are mad at the town attorney. He's a human being too. Everybody, loses their cool every once in a while, or says things, but again, he's the town attorney, and he's actually a really good town attorney. And he really researches things he's asked to research. So please use us as a resource. And I'm happy to come back another time if you want to have me.
Thank you, Brenda. That was very helpful. And I must say that even it was really good to have the town attorney. What I think would have been good, and this is hindsight is always a wonderful thing, if we had a call with the town attorney and you before we began the mission. For the rest of the task force members, things we may not have gone down this path. So something to consider for the next time, but thank you. No doubt your leadership is extremely valued, and we do appreciate even the town attorney. We do.
Yeah. Thank you for your time, Brenda.
Thank you all, really. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
All right, have a good night.
Okay, Karen, would you like to get back to the last, because I think I want to continue this conversation, but I just want to Karen to finish up first, because I think that's a good jumping off point while we all collect our thoughts about what we just heard.
And if we could, just some housekeeping, please identify yourself. If you are a member of the task force, Gina will call on you first, identify yourself. And then when we go to the members of the public, if you could identify yourself and use the chat box, please, only to mention or state that you have a question or a comment, so that everybody has a chance to hear and to listen effectively.
Karen.
Yep, let me just get it open back up again. So we were at the third question, which was, what could we do differently in the future as a result of everything that has transpired? And it's, interesting first 4 points here that somebody brought up have to do with meeting decor. And a lot of times when we're speaking at the meetings, we're just not in that practice of identifying ourselves first and last name. We should make sure that people are, disclosing who they are. And that I think involves or, is asked of the members of the public. I think I saw it in the chat tonight too. So comments should be limited to Fairfield residents. If someone wishes to speak, they should have to state their name and address. That's in line with other town meetings of public comment. The chat should be turned off unless it's going to be used as a cue for questions. So we can certainly discuss chat protocol. Zoom meeting decorum different from in-person meeting decorum. And if behavior out of line, that person should be muted immediately. So that's one person's take on what we could do differently. Another person said, I certainly think that whenever possible, we should reach out for direct conversations with the first select woman, Mr. Finlin or Mr. Baldwin, to make them aware of concerns and perhaps have those initial conversations outside of the press in order to minimize the reactivity of the politicians. So just as we know, we are not a political group, but we are operating within a political structure. So, or we're a mix of, Republicans and Democrats and unaffiliated voters. So, but we are in, we are in it. Communicate the ask or suggestion to the first select woman and town attorney. Just kind of communication is something we could do differently. Pull in the town attorney or first select woman into the conversation. So you see a theme here. We have a few people saying we should probably be talking to them a little bit more. Continue asking difficult questions also. I think that's an excellent point. Excellent are going to be hard questions. They're not going to get easier just because time is passing. Know the town chain of command and be aware that there's politics involved. Understand that change takes time, and there are those that will fight it every step of the way. So it's a great comment. All of these are great comments. I think we should continue acting and asking for forgiveness instead of permission. I don't believe that we should stop asking for space, time, voice, and participation. Town officials will have to learn to decline more professionally, and we can build all those actions into our blueprint. Also, we should begin prepping some of our task force to run for office in 2022 so that our blueprint is acted upon. I think we need to keep requests simple and straightforward so they don't get buried in the weeds of legalese and red tape. We need clarification of the universal agreements about racial justice and equity in our community, and have more time to debate within the task force. Now that we have clarity on our role, it may be easier to decipher where we can push. So actually, again, in the context of the conversation we just had, Gina, thank you for letting me finish that, because I think it's all incredibly relevant.
So with all of that in consideration, I'd like to start off by opening up to the members of the task force. If there's anything that anyone feels like they would like to add.
I'd like to share. Oh,
go ahead, Tamisha.
Who?
Tamisha.
Okay. So in light of everything, first and foremost, I personally like to apologize to the town of Fairfield for the strife that this matter has caused our town, to the first select woman, Attorney Baldwin, and the Police Commission for not respecting their position of authority to govern our community. Looking back at the outcome of last week's manifesto, two wise sayings came to mind that I need to share. They state, "Where there is no wide guidance, the people fall and go off course like a ship without a helm. But in the abundance of wise counselors, there is victory. Without consultation and wise advice, plans are frustrated, but with many wise counselors, they are established and succeed." I believe these sayings are valid in our case concerning the letter presented to the Police Commission. I was not 100% committed nor comfortable with the language of the letter, the drafting process, the delivery, and the time constraints given to the team to commit to its execution. The reason I did not go in depth with my concerns was because of the communication from the co-chairs regarding external matters and my ability to commit to the task force charge. The committee did not convene to discuss the idea of getting involved with the process of hiring a police chief, nor the drafting of the formal letter prior to the initial communication. We received the communication from the co-chair to review the drafted letter via email on the evening of January 14th with the need of approval by 12 p.m. January 15th. On January 15th, we had a Zoom call to discuss the letter where one committee member was not in agreement with the tone of the letter, even though it was expressed that it may be offensive and out of our jurisdiction during this meeting. There were only minor changes made to the letter. Per this discussion, it was communicated that the letter would be given to the Board of Selectmen to review, present to the Police Commission awaiting a response. I was not aware that this letter would be presented directly to the Police Commission until it was communicated in the patch. In my opinion, we have gotten off course. Our plans are now frustrated and we did not succeed at the initial mission that the town of Fairfield through the first selectwoman had tasked us to achieve. All the trouble and confusion could have been avoided if we had sought out wise counsel by presenting the letter to the Board of Selectmen first, as we were charged to do. This matter has burnt bridges that we were in the process of building. But I pray that we can learn from this experience and make amends to move forward with the charge. Lastly, on the record, I do not adhere to the behavior of some members on the task force, nor do I align my mindset to cause trouble in any sense of the word. As a citizen of this town, I beg to differ with our co-chair Nancy Lefkowitz's views on exposing the town of Fairfield to the good and necessary trouble required. Be it far from me to cause trouble, let alone welcome trouble. In closing, I want to admonish the members of the task force to remain focused on the pledge to study and advise the Board of Selectmen on existing town policies and procedures in an effort to enhance and improve Fairfield's commitment to the systematically fair and equal treatment of all town residents, businesses, workers, and visitors, regardless of race. Thank you for your lending and listening ear.
Thank you. Is anyone else from the task force?
Yeah, sorry, Karen, for interrupting you before. I knew she was on a tight schedule. I wanted to
Please identify yourself.
This is Steve Bogan, and it's for Karen. Sorry to interrupt you on that last, as you were giving the presentation.
It's Karen. It's all good, Steve. No worries.
Yeah, I think it was important that we hear both. Thanks, Gina, for getting us back on track. Tamisha, thanks for the letter. I don't know. I'm not going to add anything. I just wanted to apologize to Karen. Thanks for getting back on track, Gina.
Does anyone else on the task force have anything they want to add?
I just wanted to add a couple things. I have
Please identify yourself.
Oh, sorry. This is Sandra Tallman. I've been going over and over and over last week's meeting in my head, and my biggest problem with the meeting is I feel like we let a misleading narrative play out, and I mean that in a few different ways. When we sent that letter to the commission, our ask was to interview candidates. Our ask was specifically, we want to ask the candidates interviews. And I said right from the beginning, I think that we are overstepping. And when we were then told by the attorney that we had no place to interview, we sort of started backstepping and saying, oh, no, we just wanted to look at the process. And I feel like that was a very misleading narrative that we didn't fix. I am the world's worst liar. Ask my husband. I just can't do it. I don't lie. I don't try to lie. I'm very uncomfortable when I'm in a situation where things are not being exactly truthful. And that made me very uncomfortable that it was never set straight. It wasn't set straight in the press. It wasn't set straight in our meeting. And I have to say, Nancy, I know that you are the word person. You understand every single word that you say, the meaning of it. And I love that about you, because I know what you're saying. You understand the power of each word that you say, which makes me feel like you knew we were overstepping our bounds, but you did it anyway. And almost like the task force was some sort of weird pawn in a chess match, and you were using the inertia of our task force to push forward something more than what we were actually tasked to do. I went back after the meeting, I went back and I read our mission statement. Our mission statement was always to go and see if there is systemic racism, and to come out and say that we have quantitative data that shows systemic racism is not forthcoming. We don't have quantitative data. We have anecdotal data. I'm not saying that it doesn't happen, but I am saying that we have yet to uncover systemic racism. And I literally woke up at 3 o'clock in the morning a few nights ago, and I was like, what exactly does systemic mean? And I, grabbed my phone and looked up systemic, and it's the policies put in place to perpetuate the racial charge. And, we have racist incidences in town, but that doesn't make our town systemically racial. And I think that we need to, if we look at the way our town reacts to those situations, well, then that's telling. And so maybe we that's something that we address and look at, but we can't, I'm afraid that we are trying to bring the national narrative to Fairfield. I'm not saying that there are not racially motivated things that happen in our town, but I don't see them because I'm not a person of color. So if we're going to get other people in town who are like me, we need to get them to look at it in a different way. And yelling at them and calling people names is not the way to make that happen. And I mean, honestly, I came onto this task force thinking, I don't really think that we have a whole lot to do. I have changed my mind. And the way I changed my mind is this: instead of looking at it in terms of racial, I look at it in terms of, okay, well, how would I feel if this was being said about women? Because I feel that. I feel that, so it makes me look at it in a different way. And that's what we want to do. We want people to feel it in a different way so they can understand it, and then, okay, move it to a racial lens, and let's look at it that way now. I feel like we need to be, if we're going to change people's hearts, we need to be patient and understanding, and we need to educate. And that's how I feel. And Nancy, I know you want to respond.
So I think, Sandra, you've given and Tamisha, you both have given us a lot to unpack. Nancy, I'm going to let you take this first. Why don't you go ahead? I'll gather my thoughts.
I just want to make sure that I'm also heard on the record. And Tamisha, thank you for your comments. You know, I appreciate that this is a space where we've always said it's a safe space. We should all feel that we can come to it to have the necessary conversations. What I wrote in response to a very direct, I felt that I had to respond to something that was, I was put in a defensive position. They were my words. I was clear not to speak on behalf of the task force. So you absolutely can take issue with my words. I was quoting John Lewis about when he said it was that doing this work was the good trouble, the necessary trouble. And I was referencing him because I do think that the word trouble there, and yes, Sandra, you're right. I'm very intentional with my words. So I appreciate that. I don't think that for me, how I interpret that as, these are difficult conversations that we're having. There's a lot to it. So I was referencing John Lewis's words in tribute to this work. Sandra, and again, thank you for your words. I want to be clear. We called an emergency meeting, as is our right as co-chairs, based on input that we were getting because the chief of police hiring was happening so quickly. And so while we hope to be unanimous in our actions, we, like any body that takes a vote on something or a verbal vote, or when we agree to something, the majority opinion was there. You did have an opportunity. Sandra, you had an opportunity to express yourself. I am going to push back a little bit because I do think the narrative has changed, and I think we have to figure out how we learn from it rather than digging in too much into the weeds, because I think some of us may just have to agree to disagree respectfully. I don't think that we've changed the narrative in terms of where we've pushed back is that we were told that we were inserting ourselves. And that's where I think we all had a problem. I think we did ask a question. We did ask to be part of the interviews. And that's not changed. We asked to be in the room to be part of the interviews. We also asked 2 other questions, and we did. I still have no problem. I mean, Selectman Flynn said it the other day, when he was serving as the Board of Finance chair, he was accused of overreach. There are times that happens. And so you're either politely told no, sometimes less politely told no, but that's just part of doing the work, is stretching, is asking the question. So I still stand by that it was within our right. People didn't like it. They said no to us. That's okay. But that's also information, right? But what happened was that question of being part of the interview process was so triggering. And that's where I get concerned. What was so triggering in the asking of the question? Because we also asked 2 questions that we were told subsequently by Attorney Baldwin that was well in our purview to ask, which still have not gone answered by Commissioner Millington, and we certainly can follow up on that. And again, I think that, again, I don't want to dig in to, because I think what's been happening is we've been getting distracted by process. And there has been a negative narrative that has been spun, that this was ever about disrespect. And Tamisha, I'm really sorry to hear you say that, because somehow it feels somewhat, and I'm going to use words, but it may not be the right ones. So here I'm aware. It's like victim blaming. The town attorney was very dismissive. And again, he's apologized. We're going to move past. But the answer that we got was, I think, really hurtful to a lot of us, as we expressed. And perhaps, had we had an opportunity before to again, it played out in the press. And I guess the apology for it's not about apologizing for disrespecting, because I don't feel, and I stand by this, I don't feel that in asking the question, we were disrespectful to the first selectwoman or the town attorney or the police department, who we have enormous respect for. This was never about the individuals being interviewed. So I'm just going to push back on that because I think it's just not the case. We asked a question to be part of a process. And Sandra, yes, we did ask to be part of interviews, but that is being part of a process, as is the case in Westport. So I'm just pushing back a little bit there and responding, and certainly there is a lot to unpack, but just felt it was important to say that to all of you, and to confirm that I was not speaking on behalf of the task force, and made that clear.
Nancy, can I respond? I'm sorry.
Gina, do you want to take back the meeting, and then
Yeah.
Gina is organizing this now.
Okay, fine, Tamisha, go ahead.
As far as like the disrespect, what I'm saying is that there's certain protocols in the chain of command, and that was disrespected. The process was disrespected. Any information, any fact finding, our gatherings was supposed to hit the Board of Selectmen's office first. And we disrespected that chain of command per the charge and took 2 steps above the town attorney, going straight to the police commission. And as far as the article in the patch, Nancy, you signed it as the co-chair of this committee. So that's why I had to make it clear to separate myself from that. That's all. Thank you.
Karen?
So I just, I want to echo what I know that John Whaley said, and I know that Jason is saying. I strongly believe we have said everything there that can be said about last week's meeting and the press, and I really want to focus on moving forward and the learning lessons. I want to also, though, get on the record that when we discussed the letter and we incorporated Sandra's some changes, because I personally worked to edit it, they weren't just minor tweaks. I worked hard to change the tone. I worked hard to make sure that we were within our charge. What we were doing was asking questions, making requests. I do not want there to be the impression that there was any lying. I believe that we all aligned. I left that Friday believing that the entire task force was aligned, that we did the right thing by unanimously saying, yes, we're good here. There was no dissension on that call. In fact, we incorporated the kind of critique that we got and improved it. So I just want to be on the record with that feels very important, that we did due process and everybody here has a voice. But I also don't want our work on the task force to be misrepresented to the members of the public that are here, because I believe it was a very honest and comprehensive process that took everybody's opinions into effect, which was also the nature of why I wanted those questions to help us focus on moving forward. Let's get everybody's opinions on the table and move forward. I think that some of what you're talking about, Sandra, is white fragility in action. I think that as a white woman, I had to take a long, hard look when I decided to do this work about where my own biases were going to play out. I have looked at my children and said to my 2 boys who are, Caucasian boys, your life would be very different were you, Black boys. So we've had those life lessons. My daughter, who is Asian, has been a victim of microaggressions within the schools like we don't talk about here. But until every commission in town takes a look at their practices with the lens of racial equity, we won't have achieved it. It has to be something that every commission and every town body and every department, from housing to education to policing, they have to want us at the table for us to have really made a change in this town. They want our questions. They have to want our advice. So we have a lot of work to do. And the white people that are in this conversation have to suck up anything that's uncomfortable, because quite frankly, the Black people that are in this conversation haven't had the ability to say this doesn't really affect me because I'm in the majority. We have to be stronger and a little less fragile for them, in my opinion.
Thanks, Karen. And thanks, Karen. Annie, I think you had a comment.
Yes,
Please say your name. Sorry.
Annie Dindra, I'm on the task force. That was a really important lesson for the task force, what we learned. And Karen, thank you for your leadership in putting out that questionnaire, because those slides were extremely helpful to know that where we are as a group. So I would like to ask the group, where do we go from here? Can we make our hearts vast enough to overlook this, learn from it, understand where we are coming from, and then really go down and do the work that Karen is talking about. Thank you, Karen, for saying that. I wouldn't quite put it that way, because unless you haven't lived with that color, what we consider normal, a Caucasian person would think that's not normal. Our normal of what a Black person or a person of color thinks is normal is actually seen as, if that happened to a Caucasian, would be seen as most offensive. So that's where that wide, because it's a thinking that is so very, very different. I don't expect this change. There's no way this change can happen overnight. It's actually talking and reaching people's hearts and minds. Laws are very important, don't get me wrong, but changing hearts and minds is a very different thing. So if we as a task force look at that, yes, we may be able to change the law because we're a very small part of it. But if we can change the hearts and minds, the way we act for the people of Fairfield, because these calls are for everyone, maybe there we have a larger role to play. If Karen can say that we need to suck up, if Karen can say my Asian daughter is suffering, but my white boys are not suffering, that is huge. That is what changes people's hearts and minds, because here is a mother who is seeing this, who's encountering this. So I would appeal to my task force colleagues, can we move ahead? There's a lot of work to be done.
Can I ask a quick question? Thanks, Eddie.
Can you hold on a second, Steve, because Doug had something to say first. I'll call on you after.
Just very quickly, Doug Bunnell, task force member. I just want to support what Annie and Karen just said. I think the fact that our simple, whether you call it an overreach or not, our request, even if it was inartfully worded, provoked this sort of mess is it just tells us what issues are sort of embedded in all this and how difficult this work is going to be. If this committee had been a different group, not composed around or organized around racial and equity issues, I cannot imagine that it would provoke this firestorm. I'm acutely aware as a white man that, my inclination to say, let's be patient, let's follow the rules, let's sort of stay in our lane. It's a privilege I have. And I'm really, to Karen's point, want to be open to, Tamisha, I disagree with you. I think we do need to make some good trouble. And I'm committed to that. With that, I think we need to wrap this up and get to work. That would be my white privilege again, speaking a little bit, but I think it's time to see if we can't sort of figure out what our next steps are and learn from this. We've learned a great deal from this. Let's move forward and use it.
Steve?
Yeah, it's Steve Bogan. Does anybody think it's funny that I went to high school with Chief Liddy? Because I did. Nobody's laughed. Nobody laughed.
You're
about that.
hilarious.
It's true. So we got to be able to find some humor somewhere in this whole thing too, right?
People don't know you're a resident jokester. That's all.
Well,
I think Sandra wants to respond, and then I'd like to, if nobody else has anything to say, I'd like to follow up. Sandra, go ahead.
So I just want to say that I agree that our end goal is to be asked to be at the table. I think actually we should work to being expected at the table. I think we need to figure out, communication is two ways, right? So, we can communicate one way, but if it's not received, it's not going anywhere. So we need to address how we communicate so it will be received. And that's where I was going with that, Karen. I like I said, walked into this committee thinking that we didn't have a problem in town. Why would I? I don't experience racial inequity. I'm white. I'm a white woman. I do experience occasionally sexism, so I can feel that. And that's what we want people to do. We want them to feel that. And Karen, you feel the racism because of your daughter, but maybe if you weren't experiencing that, it would be a different feeling for you. So that's all that I was saying. If we are going to change hearts and going to change minds, that's how we enact changes. And that's what we have to kind of remember, that whatever we communicate is also has to be received. If it's not going to be received, we're communicating to a brick wall. So that's all.
Thank you, Sandra. I think, so what I want to say is that I recognize that it's important for us to be heard. I want to sort of point out that when we take the approach to racial justice and equity by centering, making other feel okay to listen, what we're actually doing is perpetuating a system that is dysfunctional to me. The idea that,
Gina,
you're not
I'm
aware
sorry.
of it.
Gina, you just cut out, and so I missed. I'm sorry. Could you say that again? I apologize.
It's that, when we center this discussion around making people who are listening feel comfortable, it's actually harmful to me. Because what it says to me is that my experiences, my children's experiences, my parents' experiences don't matter as much as not upsetting people. And I think we have to really drill down to what upsets people, because, there's a certain way that a request is received when it's centered around racial justice and equity. This is a playbook. This has happened, I've worked on a lot of equity committees, and this happens pretty regularly, that this is really difficult information to receive. And so because people feel bad, the impact of it is that the assumption is that this was somehow aggressive. And I think, I understand that there are people who say, I don't think that there is systemic racism in our town. But I also think that maybe that if you don't experience it, and this is not for you personally, Sandra, but I think in general, you should listen to the people who have, because it does exist. We're not making it up. And I think particularly when we're talking about this particular incident, You know, this policy has been in place for a very long time, in the 1930s. In 1940, I could not have bought a house in Fairfield. There were covenants prohibiting people from selling their house to me, which means that so while it does feel like it's me because I could buy my house now, it does actually have long-reaching tentacles, and that's what we're here to uncover. And the idea that we have to center people who this does affect in decision making is complicated. Nancy's getting a lot of heat for decisions that she made, but I'm a co-chair too, and a lot of the decisions I absolutely sometimes endorse, sometimes they were my idea, because I do believe that we have to ask, we have to be heard. And I think yelling at people doesn't work. I agree, because as soon as you yell, then that's what it becomes. That's why I speak in such a measured way all the time. Why you can hear how much I have to think about every word that I say, because I can't get angry, because then I don't have a message. And in this whole situation, what has happened is that we have spent weeks discussing the process and how we were wrong about the process and how we shouldn't have done that. And Brenda repeated all of that again tonight. And ultimately, we still don't have transparency in the police hiring. So what just happened was we had a complete distracted shift. We spent all this time talking about process, and we actually did not ever get our question answered, which is we need transparency in the process. And I think one of the things that we have to, as a group, be aware of is moving forward that is going to happen. Now, Sandra, I absolutely think that the most important thing that happened last week was that you told us that letter was too harsh. We called that meeting specifically for that reason, because when I got your email, my first thought was like, hold the phone. She's right. She's looking at this the way it's going to be read. And I think that's extraordinarily valuable. But ultimately, I don't think it serves us to center the fact that some people are going to be upset by what we have to say, because they're going to be upset no matter how it gets phrased. That's just how this works. That's why this has been established for so very, very long. Okay.
Gina,
Sorry,
do
I was hoping.
you want to take a minute and I'll take over just so you can collect yourself? Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Do you want to take a minute?
Nancy, could I just say one thing in response to Gina?
As long as you identify yourself.
Yep, this is Sandra Tallman. Gina, I get it. I understand where you're coming from, and I appreciate your measured words. I really do. It's all, I appreciate you. That's it.
Okay, so I'd like to turn this over right now. I think, Doug, you made an excellent point. I think and a lot of us have made this point now. I think we're at a place where we want to figure out how to continue, doing this work. We've started something really good. We've got to figure out next steps. I'm going to turn it over to, first I see, respond again, because there's lots of questions, but if you could really avoid chatting in the text box. Jamie made the comment about a communication and keeping them open. Ryan, you wanted to respond? Somebody, Ryan Odenak?
Yeah, I just,
Identify yourself, please.
Ryan Odenak. Yeah, I just have been, following everything, and I wanted to respond to what Sandra said, but I think Gina hit a lot of the points that I was going to make. And my overriding feeling, like in hearing and watching everything play out, was that the entire thing could have been avoided if the first selectman and the town attorney, in responding to that letter, had taken a moment and thought how it might land given the climate that we're in. The fact that the task force was formed because of a police incident. If they had looked at it and said, thank you so much for being on your game. You are looking at this, and I can understand why you might have wanted to write and be involved in this process. This is why the task force exists. We will be so happy to give you those two pieces of information. You absolutely are asking the right things by asking this. Unfortunately, you were not able to go in because of the processes. You're not able to come in on this, but we want those kinds of questions asked. So let's talk about how we could get those questions asked. When somebody responds like that, that tells me that one, they're capable of looking from a different perspective. They're not using inciting words, and they're giving us high fives for the work that we're doing in the community, period. They're saying, we're behind you, get on with your work, and we're going to do everything we can to support it. When you come upon something you're not able to do, we're going to, in a respectful way, let you know that. The committee was ready to hear that. They were open to that. They did not respond like that. And to say that, we have to form every communication so that we're thinking with them in mind, everything that comes out of their mouth, they should be thinking with the task force in mind and with the perspectives of people of color in Fairfield, period. That's where it starts, right there. It's not for the task force or people to think, how, yes, the task force job is to be aware of process, absolutely, to be aware of their mission and to understand that better. But, look, this to keep throwing it back on process, that's a lot of smoke and mirrors. It got inflamed because of the response, because people felt shut down, shut out, and tried to be shut up. And if that had not happened, there could have been understanding. There could have been working together and staying on mission, and not a lot of this kind of wasted time and going over and over the same things. And it falls, yes, there's some responsibility, task force is learning, but it falls back on how it was received and how it got played out in such a knee-jerk way that it was hard, it was insulting to hear. And
yeah, thank you. Thank
yeah.
you, Brian. Thanks for your comment. Kathy wanted to say something, and then we'll turn to Patrick.
Just
Identify yourself.
Yeah, quick comment. Kathy Wyatt, member of the public. I live on Beach Road. One of my observations that I've seen in several of the meetings that I've been to since I've watched all these meetings is that both the members of the task force and also sometimes the members of the public haven't maybe done as much self-education on these issues as they maybe could. There's lots of information out there. Nancy had earlier on in the process in preparing things for the website, sent out a list of lots of great reading materials, stuff online, things like that. I think that if everybody did some self work at home, some homework, we might start to be coming from the same place. But right now, everybody's coming from all different places, and it probably would be helpful if everybody did some homework. I would ask that as a member of the public. Thank you.
Thank you. And we can talk about that we're going to put it in the parking lot, Gina, for the conversation in terms of next steps. Patrick?
Hi, Patrick O'Brien Sevilla. I live on Oldfield Road. So as a member of the public, I would just like to say that provoking gut reactions and getting those reactions on the record allows this task force to understand how deeply rooted beliefs are in our community. And to Ryan's point, there's a difference between a rejection and a written or verbalized attack. However, these events allowed the members of this task force to understand that there is not a national narrative and a Fairfield narrative. Racism exists in Fairfield. It allows the town and our community to recognize how much work needs to happen and how much work needs to go into the blueprint that this task force will prepare and deliver to the Board of Selectmen. That's all I'd like to say.
Thank you. So we can turn it back. Are there any other members of the public that want to speak? Any members of the task force on this issue of the debrief and sort of looking backwards before we now look forward? All right. Gina, did you want to say something?
Moving on.
Yes.
So we're at our next step, because the next thing on the agenda is to hear, consider, and act on the next steps of the deep listening project.
Hold on, if I may, we never talked about McKinley School.
Oh, I know. Well, I don't know why we even skipped over that.
We skipped over it because Brenda, I believe.
Yeah, I think we need to, yeah. Thank
So
you,
let's
Karen.
move, let's take up that item. So to the discussion of.
So I think, so the issue of McKinley School was the graffiti. Is Molly still on the call? Molly McHugh?
I am. Can you hear me?
Yes. I'd like to invite Molly McHugh to speak on this. I think just Molly, if you wouldn't mind recapping what happened, and then I would love for the community to hear what happened next.
Okie doke. And just let me know, I don't have my camera on because I'm in the car. So just let me know if you can't hear me. I can't see anybody's reactions. So I'm Molly McHugh. I'm a teacher at Fairfield Woods Middle School, and I am part of the Fairfield Education Association Anti-Racism Committee. Some of you on the task force heard from me when we planned the land acknowledgement back in the fall. So we had a meeting of our subcommittee, which is our community outreach committee. And it happened to be a couple of days after the graffiti happened at McKinley School and other places around town. And as a committee, we always bring up issues that are happening in the community. This came up and we just sort of thought, what could we do for the teachers of McKinley and the students of McKinley? Because there were plenty of people, the police, you guys, there were plenty of people who were dealing with the actual act, and we didn't want to give any more voice or attention to the negative part of the act. And we tried to think of ways that we could turn it into a positive. So the committee came up with the idea to put some positive art where the negative graffiti was, and to cover over that space, and then to also cover all of the sidewalks of McKinley. So when the students come back, they would be greeted with beautiful messages of love and hope, as well as the teachers and staff over at McKinley. Because McKinley seems to be a school who is targeted for lots of things. They get negative press. They are our most diverse school. There's always something that seems to be coming up about McKinley, and we just felt that they needed a little boost. So within probably 5 minutes, and John Whaley's on this call as well, and he could attest to it, within 5 minutes of the idea, we had John Whaley contacting his high school groups. I have a middle school group that I run. We reached out to a bunch of teachers. Community members started to hear about it. And by Monday, Martin Luther King Day, we had over 100 people show up with buckets of chalk, and it was just the most uplifting, positive experience. It was great for the kids to participate in and to see that there are positive ways to turn, negative into positivity. And it was just one of those feel-good moments for the town. So it was all around an awesome experience for everybody involved. And we didn't have to get involved in the negative side of it. We let, other people handle that, and we got to do the fun stuff.
Thank you, Molly. I always get really excited when I see how our students are wanting to mobilize around making sure that people recognize that there is a way to respond. And I think we can learn a lot from the kids in that way. So our next step, we have to hear, consider, and act on the next steps of the deep listening project and the task force. I'm going to kick off the conversation by saying that, I think Brenda said a lot of things today, and we've heard things over the past few weeks, and we have to really think of what's the direction that we feel that this task force needs to take. I think we've heard some dissension about ideas and you know, we have to come to a place of unity. We've always been really, I've always felt like that's what we put forward in this group. You know, all decisions are voted on. Everyone has a voice. And so I want to hear, where do we go from here?
And I think I would add to that, Gina, the question of, there was some concern that could we go from here? And I want to make sure that there is, even with all the, you know, we've some very different points of view here tonight represented on the task force. You know, my bias is that I come to this, as I said to all of you when we were interviewing, I have a bias, and that is I asserted it very clearly in the letter that I wrote, that systemic racism exists, and that while Fairfield is not, you know, the national conversation, there are some things germane to what happens here. I believe that it exists here, and I'm not talking about the individual acts of racism, but in a systemic way. And I believe we have gotten qualitative and quantitative data, and that I have read a lot of it, and a lot exists, and I've done a lot of reading and a lot of work. I come to this bias saying that it exists, and I understand that the community is going to be looking for real metrics on that. So Sandra, to your point, that's well taken. I understand people will want to see the data, and it's there, and some of it we have, and we're going to mine it all and work through it. And we've got some of the surveys from the schools, but given that we are in somewhat different places, are we as a group, a majority of this group, there's 10 of us now, do at least 6 of us feel that we're walking in the direction that makes sense? So, you know, for me, the conversation is not where do we go, but can we go? Because that was challenged last week.
Yeah. And I also, I think I have to agree with, or just say what Nancy said, which is, I don't actually think that the question of whether there is systemic racism is bias. It is. I believe that. I have evidence of it. Steve invited someone 2 weeks ago who presented us hard facts about systemic bias in policing in Fairfield. That data, we didn't make that up. That exists. That is an example of systemic racism. What just happened to us is an example of systemic racism. What Lenasia presented in December is systemic racism. There is evidence that it exists in Fairfield. And as the current co-chair, I want to make sure that I'm communicating to all of you before we move on. That's how I feel. And that is how I'm leading this group. And if that's problematic, then that's something we need to kind of get out, because this is not something that I really feel is up for debate to me.
And it was suggested to me also that, you know, I, as a co-chair, I have to remain kind of neutral, and I'm going to push back. And if that is something that people can't get their head around, for me, we don't have the luxury of neutrality. So to me, that's an evil upon an evil. And so I guess it's important that, and Gina, I'm glad you're asserting it. It's important for people to understand. And again, if that's the wrong, I'm just going to say this, if I'm the wrong leader because I feel that, then I have to live with that, because to me, neutrality is not required in this role. And maybe the task force feels differently, but I just don't think we have that luxury, if that's the word. So are there any task force members that want to comment, and then we can turn it over to the public? I see there's some comments there.
I think
Karen, go ahead, just identify yourself.
Thank you. I'm sorry, it's Karen Lynch. There's a line in the first paragraph of our task force charge that says that Brenda proposed the formation of an advisory committee. And I think that is where I had a slightly different definition in my head than the lawyers and Brenda. for what our charge is. And it's been very clearly explained to us what our mission is or what our charge is and how we are to operate within it. And the question that I wrestle with is our current charge good enough for me in that I cannot wait a year for change to occur. I cannot say, you know, we're going to do a year of research and continue on the plan we set out with or we agreed to in November. And, you know, which kind of involved a year of listening and research, and then deliver a blueprint. I'm not speaking grammatically correct. I can't wait that long before making recommendations of things that I think should or feeling we have a seat at the table. So what I need to work with our committee, our task force members on is our charge wrong for us? And therefore we need to push to revise it? Or do we deliver the blueprint early with data that we pulled together, you know, sooner rather than later and make the first recommendation that we have a permanent standing advisory committee in place in town that has a little bit more, you know, of a stake in what's going on in our town. I see those as option 1 and option 2, and their option 3 being maintain the research as we are, and that might not be an option that I can stick with.
Karen, thank you. I just want to point out 2 things. That one of the things I, at the Board of Selectmen meeting on Monday, we had an opportunity to talk about this issue with the first Selectwoman. And one of the things that she saw as our role was to interview. And I wish we had a chance to ask her about that today, and we can invite her back because it goes back to what we were saying before. So I still think that, you know, we were moving along, and I just want to go back to this. We were really moving along in a positive direction. We were getting work done. We were like really in a groove. And I think we all felt it after that January 5th meeting, where we were finally, and then we sort of got derailed by process and all the things that we know we got derailed by. And so Karen, with what you're just asking, if we can all kind of go back to that place that we were in on January 5th, can we move forward? And I will also say that in that Board of Selectmen meeting, Selectman Flynn invited us to present to the Board of Selectmen. So I think that that's something we should talk about also. And I think as part of next steps, I would also like to throw into the hopper, it was suggested that it would be helpful to have somebody who's an expert on the Roberts rules and procedurally in terms of a meeting. I think that might just be helpful in terms of how we conduct meetings and some of the rules. And so it will be less confusing for people and that we collectively hear the same information. And similarly, just to address what Kathy said, that maybe it makes sense as part of our process to have a kind of anti-racism training, you know, bringing in somebody that can help us frame this discussion. There have been such discussions in the town, and that's something that we could discuss if that's of interest. So Jason, you had a comment, then Alex. And then again, we'll move on to the other task force members and then to the public. So Jason, then Alex.
Yeah, thank you. This is Jason Sherrod, task force member. Can you hear me okay? Okay, great. So I just kind of wanted to add, like I personally have a low frustration level right now. I hear a lot of frustration from a lot of people on the call. It's just not affecting me that way personally. And I feel honestly still encouraged and want to continue moving forward. I think I added some sentiment to that in our last call, saying that there was a lot of positive things that came out of that. So to that point, Brenda had a lot of good things to say, I think. And one of the things that she said was something about engaging the public or doing a town meeting. And we've already had a significant amount of public engagement here. I think that's another next step that we can do. I don't know what that entails, but it just seemed like that was a step we were missing. I think that there's a few other steps that we're missing that we can continue working on and getting some good information. I think moving towards developing whatever that blueprint is, like I agree with what Karen was saying about the timing around the blueprint and do we have to wait a year? But I still think there's a bunch of work we could do. One of those things being the town meeting, the other things engaging with the Board of Selectmen and talking with them more. But I really want to kind of understand that town meeting more. And I think the more engagement we get from the community, the stronger the things that we want to do. I think it'll go further. So, and I think that from one, I think it was one or two news articles in the patch, we had 50 plus people that stayed on the call for 3 hours. I think if we were to engage the community and try to pull people into these conversations, we'd get a pretty good feedback. So just something I wanted to put out there as far as next steps or something. I still think we have a lot of work to do. I don't think the survey is the right path to go. I think that's probably, we're not going to get much return on investment for the amount of effort spent there, and that we're learning a lot of other things that we can do in the meantime. So I just wanted to add that little point. I'm still very encouraged.
I see everyone is on mute, but if you could mute yourself if you're not talking. Alex is next.
Sure. Alexandra Ocampo, I'm part of the task force. Thanks, Jason. That was, you hit on some of the things that I was thinking about too. I'm taking this whole experience as a positive thing. I've seen things, heard things. Thank you. Thank you for being honest. Thank you for letting me see where there is alignment, where there is perhaps confusion. I think sunlight shining is only helpful, right? Only helpful for me. So that way, if in any way I can be of service, to continue to do so. So in my mind, what I would like to continue doing, if we rewind to January 5th, like super excited about how do we continue to get quantitative and qualitative data, right? How, maybe to Jason's point, a survey won't get us as much info, but we just heard that a lot of people need to see cold hard data because apparently my humanity is not enough. My safety is not enough. My words are not enough. You need to see the cold hard data. All right, I'll get you some cold hard data. So I'm happy to work on the survey, with anybody else who wants to participate in that. And I do think we need to continue what we talked about, getting more quantitative data, qualitative, but also engaging the community with listening. There are a whole lot of people in this town that haven't been heard, that haven't been asked. They're all over. And we need to find them. We need to find the organizations. We need to talk to people who are voiceless up until this point, because that also will continue to inform the urgency and the real stories that will change hearts and minds. I'm sorry. Today, I don't feel like I need to change your heart. If your heart's not with me in terms of my safety, my son's safety, our humanity, I don't have the energy today. Maybe tomorrow, not today though. So what I would like to do though is continue to move forward, work on survey, work on listening, and maybe those listening focus, those small focus groups are like mini town halls, or we just have one of, we schedule these kinds of like first 25 people to register, or we go to certain churches, or we go to certain organizations and we, register their folks, or maybe even do some in-person stuff for those folks who don't have internet access, who aren't able to get online. We can think of different ways to do it as well, but I just think we need to continue moving forward. And if our work is done a little early, great. And that doesn't mean that there aren't other things that we can continue doing, like taking partners with Board of Selectmen, like, working and leveraging those political relationships that I don't have, but some of you have. So I said, let's keep going. And those who want to continue learning and being uncomfortable and challenging and unlearning stuff, let's go. I'm with you. And that's my thoughts.
Thank you, Alex. Thank you so much. I can't tell if you're chomping to speak.
Yeah. No, I Alex and Jason, those were like, I love hearing all of that stuff, because that is the passion that, we brought to our interviews, why you're on this task force in the first place. I think my biggest concern is I'm concerned that we were just told that we are not allowed to do that. Because we were just given a very specific parameter that now I don't understand. And I understand, and I also am concerned that the decision about whether we do that has a filter that may not be coming from the same place that we're coming from. And because that's what I want to be doing too. I think it's good work. I think it's important work. I want to be engaging with people, but we're in trouble because we try to engage with people. So yes, I mean, now we know we have to go ask. And if there's a no, then what? I mean, yeah, I agree. Like, I'm with you, Jason, right? We have to ask.
Just ask though. This is Jason. Like, why not just ask, Gene?
No, I mean, that's my whole point. We have to ask.
March forward now, right?
Yeah, I think we have to ask. But I think the question about whether to move forward, I think that's where it's, I have to take my time to breathe with it, because it's, there's been a lot that you haven't heard that make me wonder. But anyway, any.
It's wonderful to hear that people are ready to move forward, and we must move forward. What I would strongly suggest is that blueprint, that our recommendations are so stark, that they're so clear, that the town has no opportunity but to act on them. And that, what I heard was also, where's the data? Where's the data, right? So we know it's a numbers game, but we've always known that. So we need to get smarter and say, here is it. This is what you can't refute. This is where it's going to be put into action. And I come from a place where, Gina, I don't expect this to change in the next year. We give the blueprint. I see this being debated for at least 2 to 3 years before even one of that recommendation is put into practice. But at least it's there. Think about, we're doing that work. The 10 of us and all the others, that we're doing that work for somebody else to come in and say, this work is already done, we need to move on it. We are giving the people behind it who are going to come after us the ammunition. So if we can look at it in that way and make sure that that blueprint is so tight and it's so clear, because the intelligence on this group is that of that caliber. We need to leverage that and say, okay, you want us to play by the rules, we will do this, but we will do it in a way that we will push you and that you will have no choice. And to get the citizens involved. When the citizenry rises, that's where change happens. Laws change then. So it was wonderful to see the 50 people, who stayed for the 3 hours. Let's use that. Anytime we need something, let's use them. We need you to say, is this what you want your town to do? How would you do that? And that's where you'll get the data, right, Alex? That's where you'll get those anecdotes and the data and everything. So we've got to be, I know we can do it. I mean, Karen, I know we can do it. Nancy, Gina, Karen, all of you, lead us. We have this amazing opportunity. Let's not go back revising anything, because that's just delay us.
Yeah, that's the past. Let's keep that in the past.
So let's just move ahead and let's just do this.
With that, and thank you, Annie. Every time you speak, I just want you to come and help put my kids to bed. And it's Nancy. So I just want to also add in our discussion as something to think about. Charter review is something that's coming up. And Brenda has talked about, the first select woman has talked about putting together a committee. So I think that it will behoove this committee to have a opinion on that, or a request. So that's exactly engaging in the policies and the opportunity. Another thing that the Board of Selectmen voted on was and again, I think this is a good way to engage the town attorney, or I think we start there, but the DPW just has been in the process of a policy and procedure review. And we just, the Board of Selectmen just voted to spend some money on a company that's helping put all that together. But again, an opportunity to look at direct policies and procedures in a real way, because they're literally in the middle of doing all of that. So how we fit into that, I think there's opportunity there. So I just wanted to mention that. Sorry, Gina, and then Patrick.
Yeah, I was about to actually take it to the community. We had a few people lined up. Patrick, you gave me the queue. Are you first in the queue? Oh, Molly.
Hi, hi, I'm here, Molly McHugh, town resident for 43 years. I wanted to go back to something that Nancy said, where she sort of questioned whether or not she's the right person to lead this, because she is biased and she does feel strongly. And I just wanted to, number one, say, Nancy, you are absolutely the right person to be leading this, because this is not an issue where we're able to say there's good people on both sides of this. And my question that I had, maybe I'm naive, but I'm a little confused as to why some people want it. Everyone here applied to be on a task force called the Racial Justice and Equity Task Force. So that says to me that you have a passion behind racial justice and equity, which means you've probably done your homework, you understand it a little bit, and at the very least, you understand that there are systems of racism in this town and in this country. So from an outside perspective, the past 2 weeks, I've spent 6 hours listening to some comments, and it concerns me a little bit that the people who are charged with our town's task force that are supposed to be, in my mind, helping to reduce racial issues in our town, it don't all seem to be on the same page. So how do you expect to move forward as a group when it seems like you're almost pushing against each other?
Thanks, Molly. And thank you, Patrick, for collecting the responses for me. He's our outside secretary. Jim McDonald.
Hi, this is Linda, and I've lived in the town for 15 years. And I hope I can be as elegant and speaking as all of you have been. And if I'm not, I apologize ahead of time. And I just want to tell you that this task force is very much needed, more than you could possibly ever know. And I've hesitated in sharing any of my stories because they are very personal, but I come at this from a white woman in a white family, but we are very much in biracial relationships, very much in Black communities with friends and loved ones. And we have Black Lives Matter signs in our windows. And I have personally been harassed, and personally have now, over the last week, received text messages of harassment about supporting or not supporting white supremacy. And it's a major problem, not just in this town, but in the states surrounding us, in our country. I think we all know it's a problem. And to think that Fairfield is not going to be subjected to this issue would be very just wrong to think. I can't even think of the words really. I mean, the elections, and I know these are touchy subjects, but the elections were 50-50. 50% of our town voted one way and 50% voted another way. Those are the facts. Of course, we have this in our town, and you cannot expect it to be differently. And I think the task force should be bigger. It should be through the school systems, in the churches. It should be supported throughout our entire town, in every corner. It is a huge issue. bigger than, and it's not just a Black thing. It's a Jewish thing. It's a Asian thing. It's a everything except a white thing. And that is the issue. I mean, it is so deep. I've lost several friends in town because of it, and it's a major problem. And sorry for taking so much time. I just wanted I know I can leave my house and nobody would know that it affects me. And I am so sorry for all of you that don't have the luxury of doing that because of your skin color, because that really is just a horrible, horrible feeling. But that's got to change. It just has to. And we were able to change it in the 40s when Jewish people couldn't buy houses in certain neighborhoods here, or Polish people couldn't, but now they can. So I do believe that it can be changed. And I'm not discouraged whatsoever that it can't be changed. It's just gonna be an uphill battle for a little while, and we have to be out there in people's faces explaining why it's important with passion. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dan? Jacobella?
Thank you. Thank you. I have 3 things that I'll try to say quickly. One is, first is following up on something that I believe John Whaley brought up in the last meeting, which is, I think as part of the Fairfield citizenry, I'm part of the public, that maybe we can sort of organize and sort of take on advocacy work here to leave the task force more to playing its role that it needs to play, as opposed to taking on the slings and arrows. That it should be incumbent on us as members of and residents of Fairfield to say to elected officials and other people, this is what we want as citizens of this wonderful town. And so I was thinking that it may be helpful to do that in a more organized way rather than random, individuals contacting. So if people are interested, I'm willing to, help organize almost a de facto advocacy group for the task force to support you in your efforts. And so if you're interested in being a part of that, I guess, let Nancy and Gina know, and then, give your contact information to them, and then they can send it along to me, and I'd be happy to try to organize something like that. So that's number one. Number two, I would say, again, as a member of the public, I believe that this task force, between Gina and Nancy, you have excellent leadership. I mean, you have excellent leadership between their commitment to this issue, their intelligence, their determination, their community building abilities. I mean, you're in excellent hands. I have no doubt or question in my mind. And I know it's difficult within any group that, well, first of all, leaders, as leaders or as anyone, we can make mistakes. That happen sometimes, but leaders are the ones that get attacked and criticized because they're at the top of the chain, right? And that's unfair to them, to any leader, and that they need to be supported just as much as any task force member needs to be. That's number two. And number three, it's just a suggestion. In hearing all this, I think everyone's done wonderfully here, and I see people treating each other with a lot of respect and thoughtfulness. And this is just something that came to me, is that I think it may be helpful, if you can, and in some way, that members of the task force, get to know one another better about things outside the task force, that you actually, listen to each other and build your relationships amongst one another about things that don't have to do with this task force, because I think that will strengthen you as a task force to move forward. And whether you do it for 5 or 10 minutes at the beginning of a meeting or something outside a meeting, I just encourage you to get to know one another better, because it will lead to, a better result, and you'll just build relationships, because that is the key to ending ending racism is about building relationships. So those are my 3 comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Michelle McCabe. Michelle? Did we lose her? She's been waiting so patiently.
She has to unmute.
Oh, sorry. You have to unmute, Michelle.
You're still on mute.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Because everyone's frozen.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Oh, thank you. First, I just want to say Michelle McCabe, I'm a member of the community. To echo that, I am so grateful that all of you have volunteered your time to be on this very important committee I've only been to a few meetings, and it's been apparent at all of them how desperately we need you. And to say how grateful I am that you give the public an opportunity to really accompany you on the journey. I just wanted to say that I personally am not especially comfortable with and I hope I say this in a way that truly reflects what is happening in my mind. I'm not comfortable that the task force is being positioned, from what I can hear and what I see, as having to prove that structural racism and bias exists. I don't think it's a fact. And I don't think it's incumbent on you to prove it to be true. And rather that we as a community are willing to confront the fact that we are part of a national problem, and that I'm hoping that you'll be able to provide opportunities for Fairfield residents to be able to have more of a reconciliation, to be able to hear the voices of people in our community, to understand their experience, and then to actively look at ways that anti-racist policies can be implemented here in Fairfield to help correct a problem that exists and that we shouldn't have to prove. I hope that makes sense. I'm very nervous given some of what we heard from our select woman too. And I'm not saying this to be disrespectful or disparaging, but I don't think it's the job of the task force to prove that it exists, if that makes sense.
Can I make a comment? I want to jump on what you just said, Michelle, because it goes back to something Sandra had asserted. And I just want to make sure that's clear, because, or at least we've worked it through, because if I understand, you were asserting that I was trying to push forward some sort of agenda outside of what, and I just want to make sure that what is clear is that this is not for me, and I hope we all come to this in the same place. This is not, we were very careful in both how we interviewed and selected the candidates to make sure that there was representation across political parties and perspective. We were clear, I think I go back to this idea, we were clear, me and Gina, about the mission, because while we did draft and edit with Jim, we wrote a lot of it. You know, we were painstaking in the writing. And I think that that's something that narrative has moved away a little bit. So for me, this is not about politics. And I just want to go back to that. This really is about the work, about really trying to get at the core of racial equity and justice for this town, for the well-being of the town. It's not about furthering some agenda. And again, I don't remember exactly the words you used, but I think that as we move forward, I want to make sure it's being done with a whole heart and a whole understanding and a real appreciation that this is not about anything other than the work. And what Alex said actually speaks to me about recognizing her humanity. I'm standing as an ally because I made a decision that it was not enough to not be a racist, that I had to actively be an anti-racist. And to do that meant speaking out in every turn, in every way, to speaking the truth, to calling things for what they were, to telling the truth audaciously, as hard as it may be, telling my truth audaciously. And sometimes that is counter to what may be beneficial, like politically, or makes things nice, but it's really not about forwarding a political agenda. So I just wanted to circle back to that, because it's I've been thinking about that, and if it's something that is on anyone's mind, that I'm here in that context, I I think it's important to kind of either talk about the elephant, make sure the elephant's not in the room or whatever it is. So.
Yeah, I mean, I think I want to go on the record as saying that when Nancy approached me to do this, my first response was no, absolutely not. And I think I actually swore at her because I was like, I don't know you. I don't trust you. I don't understand. I'm not willing to throw myself into something with somebody that I don't actually cares about changing things in this town. She's won me over in a lot of ways because, you know, I said no to her for a very long time. Before I ever interviewed you, I think I was saying no to you, what, 6 weeks, Nancy? That I kept telling her, no, I did not want to be on this task force. And, you know, I think we've gotten into this weird place where all of a sudden this has become this political thing, this football back and forth, which I don't really understand and I'm not really interested in. And I want to make sure that if we're going to do anything, that we have to frame that we accept that people are where they are and that their intentions are true. You know, I asked all of you, do you think that this town needs a task force and why? And you all gave answers that made me think this is how we should do it. And, you know, the decision to make this a bipartisan task force, why? That was Nancy and mine. Like, we weren't told to make it a bipartisan task force. It was just something that I thought was important because it is important to get a lot of feedback. But I think we have to have a basis, sort of a baseline of what we all sort of believe where we're working from. And, you know, whatever happens, we've been able to work together all this time because we actually do listen to each other, because we actually respect that people have different, we're in different places in our journey. And, you know, I think I don't love having a master's degree in racism, but I do because I've been practicing for my whole life. And I didn't want to go to this school, but here I am, and that's just the way it is. And so my experiences comes from living in this body behind this face for as long as I have. And so that puts me at a different place than it puts someone who doesn't look like me. And that is not to say that I don't think that we could all be on the same journey, but I also think we have to kind of respect that different people are where they are. If you're not far enough along, then, you know, you can get further along. And I think that that's part of the process, and you're here, and that's important because you're here. You know, you have other things that you could be doing right now. And so, you know, I do respect everyone who, you know, we are all on our own journey. But in terms of our journey for this task force and where we go next, you know, what is the next part of our story? That is the overarching question, because I think Karen presented a lot of options for us. And, you know, much as I keep thinking about it, it's different to me every single time, because I did not feel that, you know, I have clarity about how this is going to be received. I really don't. I'm left with more questions about that. But the thing that I'm never questioning is like the commitment of the people who are here, and not just people on the task force, but, you know, the people who keep showing up, who have other stuff to do, and who still think it's important, and then the new people who show up, never heard from before. Thank you, Linda. So, what do we want to do? I toss it back to the 11.
Well, I would love to, maybe in the interest of, we have taken so much, and Molly, I hope that kind of what Gina and I just said kind of answers, because you did ask a question, and I hope it circles back to some of what you had asked and what we said. Like, it's not about, we all need to be on the same page. We don't, I mean, I think, you know, Gina just said it very well. I just had to make sure that
we just need to be in the same book. We don't need to be on the same page, but we all have to be in the same book.
Yeah, and also, you know, intention here matters, at least in my direction, because I do serve, I am, as per the charge, a co-chair of this committee has to be a Board of Selectmen member. And I just wanted to be transparent that I really do try to make sure all points of view are heard. I think we've done a very good job of that. I think people do feel free to speak, but again, I needed to be clear about, I felt like there was something that was left unsaid. So thank you for that opportunity. And I
So
would like,
John, so we have all of the resources that we put up. By the way, I wanted before I forget this, but John Whaley has just sent me a really amazing list that I think I'd like to add, and some of it is local, that I'd like to share with everyone.
for our next, just for transparency's sake, because
So I mean, I want to put it, put it on the website.
and for next week's meeting, let's put it as backup material.
Okay.
So that people have
Also, on that subject, John also forwarded me kind of a white paper on white fragility that I figured I could send around to everybody, but maybe it could be included in the minutes. I don't know how that works.
Yep, let's do that, because we were having some clerical errors like 2 weeks ago, and some things I have to notice. The emergency meeting that we had last time, we were having a clerical shuffle, but now we've organized it and we have it down.
So I'll send it to you, and you'll
The
send
next step that I would like to make a motion, or maybe it's a homework thing, and I don't know that we have to act on it, but maybe we could talk about it. One thing that I think is important, if we are, and maybe we could save it for next time, but I also want to dangle this idea that some boards and committees or boards and commissions have a secretary, someone who's paid out of the general fund, out of contingency funds. And I learned from several people who serve on other boards and commissions that that might be something that we want to ask the town for, so that we can, it also shows an investment and a commitment. So I will find out process for that, but I'll put it on the agenda. I would love to make a motion that we table voting on next steps for next time. I think we have a lot to unpack here. I know my head is also, I see nodding.
Second. I second that.
I move to the meeting next
Wait,
week.
hold on a second, Nancy. John, did you want to say something, Whaley?
Yeah, thanks. Since my name was brought up a couple of times, I just want to throw something out there.
Sorry for, again, I'm being a stickler on all this because I just want to make sure we get it right. I had made a motion to table the vote for next steps until our next meeting, which is next Thursday, February.
Yeah, but it wasn't seconded, Nancy. So can we, because John had his hand up before you made the motion.
Steve seconded it. Sorry, it's just that this is being recorded. I just want to be. Steve, was that a second?
Second. Yes.
Okay, so it was for Thursday 4th. Is there a discussion on that particular item? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any abstentions? Any no's? Okay, so we'll table that. Sorry, John, I just.
Thank you. I just want to pipe in. I think it's really important that everybody follows the sagely advice that's been given here of doing your homework. I think there's probably various definitions that several of you guys have of what racism even is. So it's really, really important for everybody, like Gina said, to get in the same book. And in very many ways, even quite literally coming up with your group's definition of things like racism and equity and justice could be very helpful to guide your sort of, yes, especially, I'm seeing, so you want to talk about race. That's a fantastic book to use. And white fragility is good too, but it's problematic in some ways. But anyway, that's not the point. The point is this, that do the homework. Like as somebody who's a teacher and as somebody who's tried to make my adult life kind of center around social justice. One of the things that I found is that, when we have disparate ideas about what it is that we're even talking about, that's oftentimes where, we'll start to cross wires and it's not going to work out well. And I think it's really, really important for us to not talk about things that we believe and just start talking about, the things that are reality and systemic racism isn't a belief. It's a fact. And so if that's something that you're still new to, that's totally fine. But then let's dive into the research and make sure that we understand what this actually looks like and how Fairfield, even though it's not the system at large, it's a mechanism of the system. So therefore it exists in Fairfield just by definition. So my big piece, again, I sent you guys a bunch of resources and there's thousands upon thousands more. Do the research, do the homework, so you're all on the same page, and at the very least in regards to the, you know, vocabulary and philosophies of all this. So there you go.
Words from a teacher. Thank you, John. Actually, one of our constants at these meetings, Kathy Wine, who's not on the task force, but should be, is starting a definition list. The other thing I want to throw out there, there's an opening, because we're 10, and by charter we have to be 11. So hit me up. With that, if we don't have anything else, I'm gonna move to adjourn. Karen?
I have some things. I have some to-dos that I don't think should wait. The website, just remind me, you know, whether it's Ryan or Alex or whatever, but the website, because first of all, Alex, your email address on the website is wrong. So that needs to change, because that's where I got your email from when I was emailing you.
Oh, no.
Of course, it still has Sonia on there, so we need to, you know, clean that up. Also, when my husband tried to click on the town meeting tonight to get to the Zoom, it was like broken links.
Yeah.
So he couldn't figure it out. I don't know what that's about. Just texts from, you know, him saying can't. Anyway, so I just think we need to, I don't know how the town meeting, and maybe because it was a special meeting, but who's the person in our space that's dealing with website stuff?
Sure. This is Alex Ocampo. So Ryan and I are both, because it's a good amount of work, we kind of share the work in terms of updating the website. There are certain things that neither she nor I can touch. And we found that out recently, which is posting of minutes, posting of agendas, posting of links to recordings. We don't do that. There are state rules that have to be followed by the town clerk, and she posts all minutes, she posts all agendas. It's our responsibility to let her know when minutes go from draft to approved, but that's all posted by the town.
Okay.
And just so you know, that is on our agenda for next week, the website, the definitions, the media list, any backup. I just put this in the the thing, any backup ideas that you want to submit. And for now, again, I'm going to be doing, I'll submit this link and it will be posted to the YouTube channel. Ryan has graciously been doing the notes, but I think that we should also discuss next week the process, if everyone wants us to in fact hire a secretary, I think, but I'll put that on as a recording secretary.
The other thing we didn't get to is the backup documentation that I sent from the NLC. Steve actually introduced me to that a while ago, but I'd love it if you'd all take a look at that before next week, because that's really, the National League of Cities has a lot of guidance about how towns should address racial justice and equity.
We should have them come in and talk to us. That should be part, to John's point, training and growth is like the most important thing to get on the same, in the same book and on the same chapter.
For sure.
And
So
we gotta be trained on the same thing by somebody coming in and talking to us, and we just discussing it instead of passing it out and saying, go read it. You know, we need to really.
Well, it's not, I mean, we
something, not
we can't
necessarily
do that. That's outside our charge. We have to, that would be something that we'd have to actually apply to someone else to do. Even I know that's not in our charge, but yeah, I agree. That would be fantastic if we could get them involved. That's why I want everyone to look at the what I sent you, because if that's something that we can in the short term ask for, because since we are allowed to present to the Board of Selectmen as often as we want, we could actually, if everyone takes a look at it and thinks that it's something that's important enough, that could be, you know, we might want to think about phases, and maybe that's phase 1.
And to be clear, it's not as often as we want. We can make requests, but it does get vote. You know, again, I think the Roberts rules, I know Whaley, you love the procedural stuff, but I think that's also, you know, just something so people understand that there's method to the madness.
I have one more thing. I'm sorry. May I? It's Karen Lynch. Nancy?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
So, okay. So weeks ago, when we presented the findings from the deep listening, we merged the next steps from the deep listening project into the next steps for the Racial Equity and Justice Task Force next steps. Whereas really all we need to do is say step one of the plan really is complete. The deep listening interviews happened. What's still to come would be the survey and the listening groups, but I want to make sure on the agenda for next time, it's pretty clear if we're all good that those initial interviews check the box. We did those, we reported the findings, we're done with that phase. So the only future next steps would be, are we going to continue with the town survey, the listening groups, et cetera. But the deep listening part of that agenda line item, we can call it done. I think we might need to just wrap that one up.
All right, so then we'll just put that on as a, let's put that on as a separate vote for next time, since we already voted to move the item next time. So we'll put it on to like close that chapter.
Yeah, because what
a separate thing. Yep.
Yeah, we just have to be clear, because it just keeps carrying over and over when
Yeah.
we're not doing that work anymore. We're done there.
Right.
Okay.
But it also gives people an opportunity, and we'll put it in the backup to look at it and make sure there are no questions, so that we have formally closed the loop. So we can't ask if there are new items of business because it's a special meeting, but is there any other comments? Does everybody in the task force feel that they've had a chance to speak, that they feel heard? I want to make sure that there is nothing left unsaid, because now our charge is forward motion, whether whatever that looks like. I think that, I hope from this place, we've all said what we need to say to this moment, and that, we can carry forward. So with that, is there anyone that feels they haven't said anything on the task force, or there's something left to be said? Okay. How about from the public? Gina? Oh, you're muted.
Thanks.
What I want to say is, I hope that the next 2 weeks are less, are more productive in this, or I hope that we have a productive time moving forward. I look forward to that. All right, is there, Gina, you want to bring us out?
Yeah, make a motion to adjourn. Any second?
Second the motion.
Who's taking the minutes, by the way?
Who do you
Ryan.
think? Ryan?
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you, Ryan. Where I got lost in my sauce. Oh yeah.
Who made the motion?
I made the motion. Doug seconded it.
Second.
All in favor?
Yeah, all in favor. That's the word. All in favor.
Aye.
Aye.
Any nays? Any sessions? Good night, everyone.
Good night. And
Everybody,
Good
thank you.
night.
Thank you very much.